Welcome to another Religious Education 5-minute recap video. We're on the exam board Eduqas, we are on Foundational Catholic Theology, and we're exploring the good and evil unit. Today's session is going to focus upon philosophical challenges to God's goodness and his existence, and I'm hoping you're going to be able to understand and explain some of those philosophical challenges by the end of this session. So first of all, before we get started, we need to reflect on the main qualities of God. Now this rests on 3 omni words, so if you want a mini challenge, pause the video now, see if you remember all 3 and what the definitions mean. As for now, the 3 main qualities are God is omnipotent, omniscient and omnibenevolent. Now, when we talk about God being omnipotent, we mean that he's all powerful, so therefore God can do anything. When we talk about God being omniscient, it means God is all knowing, so he knows everything that has happened, is happening and will happen. And finally, if God is omnibenevolent, it means God is all loving, so he loves everything, and in particular, he loves the humans that he's placed within creation. Now, it's important to know these 3 qualities because they're going to provide the foundation or the building blocks from which different philosophers are now going to challenge God's goodness and God's existence. So first, we're going to start with a philosopher called Epicurus. Now, Epicurus, he started with this idea of something called the problem of evil, and basically looked at evil in the world and he says, is it a problem for God? And he summarized it best in his riddle, so it's called the Epicurean riddle. Is God willing to prevent evil but can't? Then God is not omnipotent. Is God able to prevent evil but won't? Then God is not good. Is God able and willing? Then where did evil come from? Is God neither able nor willing? Then why call him God? When we look at that in a bit of a nutshell, what he's breaking down is all of the omni qualities, and he's saying, does God want to stop evil but he hasn't got the power to do it? Is God able to do it but he doesn't want to do it? Or is he able to do it and does want to do it? Then why do we actually have evil at all? And we're going to explain each of these now by breaking them down. So omnipotent, if God was all powerful, then he could stop evil if he wanted to. And if he doesn't stop it, then he isn't omnipotent, or maybe he doesn't exist. When we look at omniscient, if God knows everything, then he knows when and if evil will occur. Therefore, he should stop it. And if he doesn't, well, then maybe he's not omniscient, or maybe he just doesn't exist. And the final one, if God is omnibenevolent and he loves humans, then he would not want them to suffer. And if suffering occurs, then perhaps God doesn't love us, or maybe he doesn't exist. So there's a nice starting off point there for you to use kind of some evidence and some explanations with each of the key terms. Now moving on, we'll look at David Hume. Now David Hume was an empiricist. Now this means that he only trusts things you can prove with your senses through scientific discovery. And he decided to look at these qualities of omnipotence and omnibenevolence in particular. And he also looked at the quality of evil in the world. And he came up with like a bit of a conclusion, really. So he starts off like this. He said, both of the omni qualities, you can't actually prove them through scientific evidence. There is no way through empiricism can you prove that God is omnipotent and omnibenevolent 100%. Then he said, but I can definitely prove there's evil in the world because I can experience it on a daily basis. Take any examples of moral or natural evil that you discover. Take theft, murder, take natural disasters. We know they're there. So this leads him to a conclusion. Since we know evil exists, God either can't stop it or he doesn't want to. Therefore, evil is a problem for God. So he's kind of souped up and brought up another level to the Epicurean riddle there. Now, building on this, John Mackie then uses both Epicurus' ideas and Hume's ideas, and he created a thing called an inconsistent triad. You can see it on the screen. He says, I'm going to look at these 3 qualities. God's omnibenevolent, God's omnipotent, and evil exists. He says, on this triangle, this triad, only 2 of the statements can be correct at the same time. And he looks at it and he says, which of these do I definitely know is true? And he says, well, evil exists because I can prove it through empirical evidence. I can see it in the world. Therefore, God is either not omnibenevolent or not omnipotent. He could be loving, but he just couldn't do anything about it. Or he could be powerful, but he doesn't want to do anything about it. So you can have a God, but it's definitely not the Christian God or the God of monotheism that you'd expect. Or maybe he does go to the conclusion he doesn't exist. John Stuart Mill, he also says the existence of evil disproves God's existence. He says because if God was really loving, wouldn't evil be distributed fairly? But it's not. And this would suggest a really cruel and malevolent God. Because, when people ask the question, why do bad things happen to good people? Well, John Stuart Mill says that doesn't seem very fair. So therefore, God clearly can't exist, or he's a cruel, malevolent God. And finally, we get to William Rowe. Now, William Rowe, he built upon this idea of a malevolent, cruel God. And he argued that the huge amounts of pointless evil and suffering in the world is evidence enough that God is cruel or that there's no God at all. And he used an example of a deer caught in a forest. He said, imagine this deer caught in a forest and it burnt horribly and it's lying there, and finally, after days and days, it dies. Rowe asks, what is the point of that suffering? Why is it going through that? What greater purpose did it achieve? What was God doing there? What was he trying to get across? And he says there's so many different examples of these kind of pointless evil and suffering in the world. It clearly shows that we've got a cruel God, or there is no God at all. Now, there's been a lot for today, but have a look down this list, see if you can write a sentence about each and link them to philosophical challenges about belief in a good God. If you can do that, you've been successful. You want to push yourself that little bit further? Go for these example questions. Thank you for your time and good luck.